Our saga begins in 1650, more than 110 years before the founding of the United States of America, when the Roosevelts' first ancestor, Dutch-born Claus Martensen van Roosevelt, landed in the bustling harbors of New Amsterdam, a city that would become the metropolis we know today as New Amsterdam, York. In 1652, Claus, lured by the siren call of untapped prospects, purchased from one Lambert van Valkenburg a significant tract of land in the fertile expanse of what is today known as Midtown Manhattan. Interestingly, this visionary acquisition covered an area that would become the site of such monumental landmarks as the Empire State Building, the iconic Madmen Avenue, and the J.P. Morgan Library. Specifically, this area extended from present-day Lexington Avenue and 5th Avenue to approximately 29th Street and on to 35th Street. By today's standards, this area amounted to more than 50 acres of luxury real estate. Claus's son, Nicolaas, used these landholdings to become the city's first alderman, beginning the family name's inextricable link with political power and financial influence. Nicholas's children, Johannes and Jacobus, continued their father's respected legacy by founding two prominent Roosevelt families in the Oyster Bay and Hyde Park areas. To put things into perspective, both Oyster Bay and Hyde Park were places that served as inspiration for the neighborhoods depicted in F. Scott Fitzgerald's novel The Great Gatsby and subsequent films. So even in those days, the Roosevelts seemed to know a lot about where old money liked to live. John Roosevelt was an entrepreneur blessed with extraordinary insight that quickly became a family trait, and subsequent generations born of John entered into the most elite circles of New York through strategic marriage alliances with other prosperous families and astute real estate acquisitions in key locations in the city, as already mentioned previously. Their marriages served as tactical partnerships as well as romantic ones that cemented their position in New York's high society, and the Roosevelts' name began to be spoken alongside the city's most formidable luminaries. Then Cornelius Roosevelt, Johannes' great-grandson, greatly enhanced the family's wealth and ambitions by inheriting a significant fortune from his father, James Jacobus Roosevelt, in 1841. He quickly introduced the Roosevelt family name to New York's financial elite. Cornelius was initially involved in importing hardware, but then wisely turned his attention to the lucrative plate glass industry, which greatly increased his wealth. Moreover, Cornelius did not stop at industry alone. He entered finance, becoming the founding director of the Chemical Bank of New York, the predecessor of the modern J.P. Morgan Chase & Company. In terms of numbers, he stood shoulder to shoulder with the leading millionaires of his era, such as William B. Astor and Peter Lorillard. And by 1868, his fortune probably reached $25 million, equivalent to about $600 million today. Thus, although Roosevelt's name today is associated primarily with political power, we cannot lose sight of his deep connection with the financial aristocracy of New York. Indeed, this monumental family was a mainstay in transforming the city from a humble Dutch trading post into an unprecedented epicenter of wealth and power, both nationally and globally. However, as we know, wealth is only one dimension of success, and working in the White House during America's Gilded Age presented an entirely separate set of challenges and accomplishments. In 1884, Theodore Roosevelt faced a terrible disaster that destroyed his world in just 48 hours. When Alice gave birth to their first child, Alice Lee, Theodore faced unspeakable grief. He lost his mother to typhus and his beloved Alice to kidney complications, all within the walls of their home. Heartbreak forced him to immerse himself in his political duties for 4 months. However, perhaps to cope with the heartache, the irresistible appeal of the untouched landscape called him away from the East Coast. Theodore went to the harsh Dakota wastes, where he found a semblance of solace in the role of a cattleman and frontier wanderer. Among the sprawling plains, he found relaxation in hunting grizzly bears and pastorally caring for his livestock. The unforgiving winter of 1887-1888 destroyed most of his livestock, and he decided to return to the East Coast, where he rekindled his love for his childhood sweetheart, Edith Kermit Caro. In 1886, the romance-worthy couple swore their undying devotion in a remote English ceremony. They built their home retreat in the captivating surroundings of Sagamore Hill in one of the aforementioned hometowns, Oyster Bay, New York. In subsequent years, their family expanded. Alice was joined by another, Theodore, Kermit, Ethel, Archibald, and Quentin. Returning to New York, Teddy enthusiastically began writing, which first gained recognition with the book The Naval War of 1812, published in 1882. During this fruitful period, he wrote several notable works, including The Life of Thomas Hart Benton in 1887, The Life of Gouverneur Morris in 1888, and his magnum opus, The Conquest of the West, a 4-volume epic that spanned more than half a decade. In addition, Theodore Roosevelt's political aspirations were renewed. In 1886, he ran for mayor of New York, although he did not achieve victory. However, the subsequent endorsement of Republican presidential candidate Benjamin Harrison in 1888 catapulted him onto the national stage. Harrison's triumph contributed to Theodore's appointment to the Civil Service Commission, which he served with unwavering devotion, even when faced with serious political persuasion to deviate from ethical standards. In maintaining his principled views on civil service laws, Roosevelt did not waver even after winning a second appointment from Democratic President Grover Cleveland in 1893, despite the disapproval of party luminaries. After becoming president of the New York City Police Department in 1895, he pursued reforms with indomitable will. Among his initiatives are a ban on Sunday sales of alcohol and cleansing the police council itself from corruption. 1897 marked another career milestone when President-elect William McKinley appointed Teddy Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Roosevelt was an ardent believer in naval power as the cornerstone of national defense, and the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor in 1898 spurred him to immediate action. As acting Secretary of the Navy, he quickly mobilized the fleet and ordered Commodore George Dewey to prepare for battle with Spain, a critical prelude to the upcoming invasion of the Philippines. When the Spanish-American War began, Roosevelt left his administrative position to lead the 1st U.S. Volunteer Cavalry, popularly known as the Storm Riders. This eclectic force, composed of Ivy League graduates, cowboys, sheriffs, police officers, and Native Americans, stormed San Juan Hill under Roosevelt's leadership, demonstrating unsurpassed courage even in the face of enormous casualties. Their triumphant return to the United States was met with near universal approval and cemented Roosevelt's wartime legacy. After Roosevelt became a celebrated war hero, the New York Republican Party invited him to run for governor. In a heated battle with Democratic Judge Augustus Van Wyck, Roosevelt won a landslide victory thanks to the influential support of Thomas C. Platt, a protege of the state Republican Party. However, Roosevelt's unwavering commitment to autonomous politics and patronage quickly led to a break with Platt. In particular, as Roosevelt moved toward progressive policies such as taxing public utilities, tensions with Platt increased. Franklin Delano Roosevelt Jr. was born in August 1914, just months before the end of hostilities in World War I, and inherited a name that arguably carries more prestige and pressure than any other in American history. At the time of his birth, Roosevelt's father was Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and after a distinguished military career, Franklin Jr. held a congressional seat from New York from 1949 to 1955. There, he represented his constituents and championed issues dear to him with unremitting energy, leading President John F. Kennedy to recognize him and appoint him Secretary of Commerce in 1963. In this capacity, he contributed to the economic prosperity of the country. Continuing the Roosevelt line of high government positions and financial power, and further strengthening his family's commitment to progressive ideals, Roosevelt Jr. served from 1965 to 1966 as the inaugural chairman of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, an agency that became a linchpin in the fight for civil liberties and fairness in the workplace. It is noteworthy that Roosevelt Jr. himself continued the tradition of strategic international marriages, like his father and mother. In 1937, Roosevelt Jr. married the legendary heiress and socialite Ethel DuPont. Today, the Roosevelt family remains inextricably linked to both public service and membership of the financial elite, as it has been for literally hundreds of years. For example, Theodore Roosevelt IV became famous as an investment banker and an ardent environmentalist. Passionate about conservation and sustainable practices, he founded numerous environmental organizations and advocated for wildlife and land conservation on a global scale. Tweed Roosevelt, who is also the great-grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt, leads the Theodore Roosevelt Association as its president and CEO. The non-profit organization is dedicated to preserving the legacy of President Theodore Roosevelt, and Tweed, like his great-grandfather, is an ardent supporter of environmental conservation and public service. Overall, the Roosevelt family, like many American dynasties, is a collage of contradictions. On the one hand, there are a bunch of ruthless old believers businessmen who are voraciously gobbling up real estate, financial influence, and political power. On the other hand, they are the living embodiment of nobility, a family that has never allowed their enormous wealth and influence to stop them from doing good not only for their fellow citizens, but for the world at large. That's all for us, dear friends. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to write comments. See you in the next video. Good luck, everyone, and see you soon.